Have you ever seen a courtroom fall completely silent because of the words of a child? When a little girl stood up and shouted, "Let my nanny go! I know the truth!" Even the judge froze. What secret could she possibly know that would change everything in that room? Before we go on, allow me to wish you peace and good health. Tell me from which country and at what time are you watching this story? They said autumn in Grace Hill could heal any heart, but for Evelyn Hart, it was just another place to hide her pain. The Greyhound bus hissed as it came to a stop beside the quiet town square. Evelyn stepped down, suitcase in one hand, the other clutching her worn coat against the crisp Texas breeze. The air smelled faintly of baked apples and wood smoke. Across the street, an old man waved from the porch of the diner, one of those small-town gestures that still existed here, where people nodded instead of rushing. Grace Hill looked like a place time had forgotten. A church bell, a row of antique shops, and a single traffic light that blinked lazily between red and yellow. Evelyn had heard the town was kind to strangers, though the look from the bus driver as she left said otherwise. A cab dropped her at the Caldwell estate, an old colonial-style house sitting high on a hill, white columns and all. The kind of home you'd see on Christmas cards, grand but lonely. A woman in a neat beige suit stood waiting by the door. "You must be Miss Hart," she said without smiling. "I'm Lydia Crane, Mr. Caldwell's fiancée." Evelyn nodded politely. "It's nice to meet you." "We don't do hugs here, Miss Hart." Lydia's voice was soft but precise, her perfume sharp like citrus. "You'll find the rules of this house posted in the kitchen. Mr. Caldwell expects punctuality. Sophie has a strict schedule." Sophie. The name lingered like a whisper. The little girl Evelyn was hired to care for, 8 years old, quiet and still grieving the mother she lost 3 years ago. Inside, the house gleamed with quiet luxury. Polished wood, portraits of ancestors, the faint hum of a grandfather clock. But there was something missing. Laughter, maybe. Warmth. The kind of sound that made a house feel alive. "Mr. Caldwell will see you now," Lydia said, leading her to a study filled with dark leather and old books. Nathan Caldwell looked up from behind his desk. Mid-40s, tall, serious, the kind of man whose eyes carried too many storms. "Miss Hart," he greeted, standing. "Thank you for coming on short notice." "It's my pleasure, sir. You came highly recommended." His voice was even polite. "My daughter is delicate. Please respect her space." "I understand," Evelyn said, though she wasn't sure she did. He nodded once, already turning back to his papers. "That's all." Outside the study, Lydia walked her to the guest room on the second floor. "One more thing," she added, pausing at the door. "Use the back staircase. The front is for family." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Of course." That night, she unpacked her few belongings, a photo of her late mother, a well-worn Bible, a notebook. She sat by the window, watching the hill lights flicker below. Somewhere in the house, a child's laugh echoed faintly, then stopped as if swallowed by the silence. She wrote in her notebook, "This house feels beautiful, yet hollow." The next morning, she woke early to the sound of rain tapping softly against the glass. She found Lydia already in the kitchen, dressed as if she were going to a board meeting. "Breakfast is at 7 sharp," Lydia said, not looking up from her phone. Evelyn set the table, laid out pancakes, fruit, and maple syrup. The clock struck 7. Footsteps approached light, hesitant. Sophie entered, barefoot, her hair slightly messy, holding an old camera by its strap. She glanced at Evelyn, then at the pancakes, but didn't speak. "Good morning, sweetheart," Evelyn said gently. "You must be Sophie." The girl nodded but didn't sit. Lydia glanced over her shoulder. "No syrup, Miss Hart. It stains the linens." Evelyn said nothing. Sophie stared at the syrup bottle for a long second, then sat down anyway. Evelyn poured her a small amount, ignoring Lydia's frown. When Sophie tasted the first bite, something small changed the tiniest upturn at the corner of her lips, a forgotten habit. Nathan walked in a moment later, suit pressed, tie neat. He paused at the doorway, noticing his daughter smiling for the first time in months. His eyes softened, though only for a heartbeat. "Good morning," he said. Sophie didn't answer, but she took another bite. Evelyn met Nathan's gaze briefly. It was unreadable, guarded, but not unkind. Outside, the The wind picked up again, scattering golden leaves across the porch. The rest of the morning passed quietly. Lydia left for town, heels clicking down the hallway, leaving behind a faint trace of perfume and control. The house exhaled when the door closed. Evelyn took the chance to tidy up, humming softly while the rain softened into drizzle. Sophie followed her around like a silent shadow, camera swinging at her side. She rarely spoke, but her eyes caught everything: the way sunlight curved around the window frame, how Evelyn's hair shimmered when she leaned toward the light. "Do you like taking pictures?" Evelyn asked while wiping the counter. Sophie hesitated, then nodded. "Mom used to say pictures keep people safe." Her voice was so quiet it almost disappeared into the hum of the clock. "That's a lovely thought," Evelyn said. "She sounds like a kind woman." Sophie didn't answer. She simply lifted the camera and took a photo of the table, where a single marigold sat in a vase. The click of the shutter was delicate, like a heartbeat. Later that afternoon, Lydia called from her car. "Remember, Miss Hart," she said through the speaker, "Mr. Caldwell values order. Don't let Sophie wander, and keep her away from the attic." "Yes, ma'am," Evelyn replied, though she wondered why an attic could be off limits in such a grand house. By evening, the rain had stopped. The sky turned honey gold as the sun dipped behind the trees. Evelyn stood at the kitchen window, watching the porch light flicker on. It was the kind of soft light that belonged to stories told long ago, once about second chances and people finding their way home. Nathan returned late. His footsteps were steady but weary, the kind of sound that said more than words ever could. "Everything go well?" he asked without looking up from the mail in his hand. "Yes, sir," Evelyn replied. "Sophie had a good day. She helped me bake." He paused, glancing toward the kitchen where a small plate of cookies rested. "She hasn't baked since her mother passed," he murmured, almost to himself. Then, quieter, "Thank you." Evelyn smiled gently. "She's a bright girl. She just needs a little light." Nathan nodded, then retreated into his study, leaving the faint scent of rain and cologne in his wake. When the house fell silent again, Evelyn washed the dishes slowly, listening to the wind play with the shutters. Somewhere above, a soft creak of floorboards made her look up Sophie's room. She dried her hands and walked upstairs, stopping before the little girl's door. A thin line of warm light spilled from underneath. Evelyn knocked softly. "Miss Evelyn?" a small voice said. "Yes, dear? Can you read me a story?" "Mom used to." Evelyn's throat tightened. "Of course," she whispered, stepping inside. The room was small but full of memory: stuffed animals on a shelf, drawings taped to the wall, a framed photo of Sophie's mother smiling in a summer dress. Sophie was curled beneath a quilt, clutching her camera like a talisman. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed and opened a worn book she'd brought from her bag. The light from the bedside lamp cast a golden halo around them. She began to read, her voice slow and soothing, wrapping the words in warmth. Sophie's eyelids fluttered, her breathing slowed. As the story unfolded, the walls of the grand, cold house seemed to soften a little, as if listening too. Outside, the wind brushed past the windows, gentle now, carrying the faint scent of wet leaves and cinnamon from the distant diner downtown. When Evelyn looked up, she noticed the photograph on the nightstand: Sophie's mother, holding the same marigold Evelyn had seen earlier that day. The petals in the photo glowed under the lamp's light, like a quiet sign that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Evelyn closed the book softly. The house had finally learned how to breathe again. And somewhere deep inside her heart, a small voice whispered, "Maybe this town could heal after all." The morning sun crept slowly over Grace Hill, touching the Caldwell mansion with its first light. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and smelling faintly of wet cedar. From the kitchen window, Evelyn watched the mist drift above the meadow, her hands wrapped around a cup of black coffee. Somewhere, a rooster crowed, and the church bell down the valley chimed 7. She had been there only a week, but the house already felt familiar: the rhythm of the clocks, the whisper of the wind under the doors, the way Sophie's laughter, faint as it was, seemed to echo a little longer each day. That morning, Evelyn found Sophie sitting on the kitchen counter, feet dangling, camera resting on her lap. "You're up early," she said with a smile. "I couldn't sleep," the girl replied softly. "The house makes noises at night." "Aye? Old houses do that," Evelyn said, stirring pancake batter. "It's how they remind us they're still alive." Sophie tilted her head. You think houses can feel things? Maybe. Especially this one. Evelyn flipped a pancake. Golden and perfect. I think it forgot how to smile. Sophie giggled quietly, then covered her mouth as if she wasn't supposed to. For a moment, her eyes sparkled the first spark of childhood in a long time. When Lydia entered, heels clicking like a metronome, the air cooled. "Good morning," she said, surveying the table. "No syrup, please. It stains the linens." "Yes, ma'am," Evelyn said calmly, though she had already placed a small pitcher on the side. Sophie glanced nervously at Lydia, then at Evelyn. Without a word, Evelyn winked and poured just a drizzle onto Sophie's plate. The girl's smile flickered again. Nathan walked in a few minutes later, still buttoning his cuffs. "Morning," he said. His voice was polite, but distant. "You two seem to be enjoying breakfast. She's learning to make pancakes," Evelyn said cheerfully. He paused, almost smiling. "Well, that's good." His gaze lingered on Sophie's syrup-covered grin. Then, catching Lydia's look, he cleared his throat. "I have a meeting in Austin today. I'll be back late." When he left, Lydia watched the door close behind him. "Mr. Caldwell appreciates discipline, Miss Hart. Remember that." "Ugh." Evelyn nodded, wiping the counter in silence. Lydia's heels faded up the stairs, and the house relaxed again, as if it too had been holding its breath. The rest of the morning flowed easily. Sophie followed Evelyn into the garden, camera in hand. The marigolds glowed bright orange against the damp soil. Evelyn knelt to tie her hair back. "You know, these flowers mean warmth," she said. "They remind people of the Sunday." Sophie adjusted her lens. "Mom used to say that too." Evelyn looked up, surprised. "Did she plant these?" Sophie nodded. Before she left, Dad said they keep coming back every year, no matter what." Evelyn's heart ached at the quiet strength in the child's voice. "That's because good things have deep roots," she said softly. The girl took a photo. The shutter's click sounded like a promise. That afternoon, they baked cookies. Evelyn let Sophie stir the dough, while country music played softly on the kitchen radio. The lyrics were about forgiveness and open roads songs the older folks in town probably knew by heart. "Can I bring some to Dad's office?" Sophie asked shyly. "I think he'd like that." But when Lydia returned from town and saw the kitchen, she frowned. "This is not a playground, Miss Hart. Please keep her away from the stove. She's not a child," Evelyn finished gently. "Sometimes that's exactly what she needs to be." Lydia's lips tightened. "You may have experience with children, but this is not one of your classrooms." Evelyn smiled politely. "No, ma'am. It's her home." The tension hung thick as flour dust. Later, after Lydia left the room, Sophie whispered, "Why doesn't she like you?" Evelyn knelt down so they were eye to eye. "Sometimes people are afraid of what makes others happy," she said. Sophie thought about that. "Then I'll just keep smiling until she's not afraid anymore." Evelyn touched her hair gently. "That's very brave of you, sweetheart." Outside, the late afternoon light slipped through the trees, laying golden ribbons across the floor. For the first time in years, laughter filled the Caldwell kitchen. But upstairs, behind a half-open door, Lydia watched the scene in silence, her expression unreadable. Evening settled gently over Grace Hill, painting the sky in streaks of rose and amber. The scent of fresh rain mixed with the faint aroma of the cookies cooling on the counter. Evelyn lit the small lamp in the living room, the soft yellow glow pooling like honey over the floorboards. Sophie sat cross-legged on the rug, camera beside her, stacking her picture prints in neat rows. "Look," she said, holding one up. "This one's you." Evelyn leaned closer. The photo showed her face turned toward the window, the light catching her hair. "That's beautiful," she whispered. "You have an artist's eye." Sophie beamed, cheeks flushed pink. "Mom used to say that too. And your mom must have been very wise." "She was." The girl hesitated. "Do you think she'd like you?" Evelyn's voice softened. "I'd like to think so." At that moment, Nathan entered quietly, still wearing his work jacket. His shoulders looked tired, but his eyes warmed at the sight before him, his daughter laughing, her hands sticky from cookie dough, Evelyn sitting on the rug beside her. It was a picture of something he hadn't realized he'd missed. Peace. "I didn't mean to interrupt," he said, standing by the doorway. Evelyn rose, brushing flour from her apron. Not at all. We were just admiring Sophie's photos. Nathan stepped closer, looking down at the prints scattered across the floor. In one, Sophie had caught the reflection of sunlight on the glass jar of marigolds. In another, Evelyn smiling faintly, unaware of the camera. "You've got talent, kiddo," he said quietly. Sophie's face lit up. "You really think so, Dad?" He nodded. "Your mom would have been proud." The air between them changed something delicate, like the first note of a song long forgotten. Evelyn stood quietly, not wanting to break the moment. Then Lydia's heels clicked down the hallway, sharp as the tick of a clock. She appeared at the doorway, perfectly composed, her smile practiced. "Well," she said, eyes flicking between Nathan and Evelyn. "Isn't this cozy?" Nathan cleared his throat. "We were just—" "I can see that." Lydia's voice was smooth, but her eyes glinted.
"Sophie, bedtime. You have schoolwork tomorrow."
"But Miss Evelyn?" "No, but, sweetheart," Lydia interrupted. "Upstairs." Sophie hesitated, looking to her father for help, but he said nothing. She gathered her photos and climbed the stairs slowly, the old steps creaking beneath her small feet. When the sound faded, Lydia turned to Evelyn. "You're making yourself quite at home," she said coolly. "I'm just trying to help Sophie feel safe," Evelyn replied, calm but firm. "I'm sure you are. But remember your place here. You're an employee, not family." Evelyn's fingers tightened around her apron. "Understood, ma'am." Lydia smiled faintly, satisfied, and walked toward Nathan. "Darling, you should get some rest. Big day tomorrow." Her hand lingered on his arm a moment longer than needed, then she disappeared up the stairs. Nathan stood there, silent, the warmth from earlier already fading. Evelyn gathered the empty cups from the table, her heart heavy. "Good night, Mr. Caldwell," she said softly. "Good night, Miss Hart," he answered, his tone polite but distant again. When she reached the hallway, she paused. From upstairs came a faint giggle, Sophie, whispering to her camera in the dark, pretending to click one more photo. Evelyn smiled to herself, whispering, "Good night, little one," as she turned off the lamp and looked back once at the dim living room. The house was quiet again, almost too quiet, as though holding its breath. Upstairs, behind the tall window of the master bedroom, Lydia stood watching through sheer curtains. Her silhouette was still, hands clasped in front of her chest. Outside, the porch light flickered once, then steadied. "She won't last the season," Lydia murmured, her voice a shadow against the glass. The wind rose softly, carrying the scent of rain through the open fields below Grace Hill. The house, for all its splendor, had forgotten how to smile. But somewhere inside its walls, a child was dreaming again, and perhaps that was enough for now. The rain returned to Grace Hill that Friday afternoon, a steady curtain tapping gently against the Caldwell windows. The kind of rain that slowed everything down, time, thoughts, even breath. Evelyn was in the kitchen folding napkins when she heard it, the soft, muffled sound of crying. It came from upstairs, faint at first, then clearer. She hesitated, setting the napkin aside. The hallway outside Sophie's room was dim. The only light, a thin gold line beneath the door. Evelyn knocked softly. "Sweetheart, are you all right?" No answer. Only the sound of a sob that broke in half. When she pushed the door open, the little girl was sitting on the floor, knees drawn to her chest, her tiny shoulders shaking. "What happened?" Evelyn knelt beside her. Sophie wiped her eyes, voice trembling. "Miss Lydia said I'm bad, that I make too much noise. She locked me in here for being disrespectful." Evelyn's heart tightened. "For what, darling?" "I just wanted to show her the picture I took of Dad." Evelyn pulled Sophie gently into her arms. "You didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes, grown-ups forget that kindness matters more than rules." The girl nodded against her shoulder, sniffling. Evelyn looked around the room. The curtains were drawn, the lamp unplugged. The air felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. She stood, opened the curtains wide. "There," she said. "Even on rainy days, light finds a way in." Downstairs, footsteps clicked along the marble floor. Lydia's voice echoed faintly. "Discipline builds character." Evelyn's jaw tightened. She closed the door quietly, lowering her voice. "Let's not tell her I let you out just yet, okay?" Sophie giggled weakly. Our secret. Evelyn smiled. Every house needs a few of those. Later that evening, the rain eased to a whisper. Sophie lay on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, while Evelyn made hot cocoa in the kitchen. The sweet smell of chocolate and cinnamon filled the air. Miss Evelyn? The girl called softly. Will you tell me a story again? Evelyn sat beside her, holding the steaming mug carefully. How about one about a little sparrow who got lost in a storm? Sophie nodded, eyes wide. There was once a tiny bird who tried to fly home, Evelyn began, her tone low and rhythmic, like a lullaby. But the storm pushed her away. Everyone thought she'd never find her nest again. Still, she kept flying, even when her wings were tired. Did she make it? Sophie whispered. Evelyn smiled. Only when someone believed she could. The child's gaze softened, as though she understood something beyond her years. From the hallway, unseen, Lydia stood listening. Her eyes were sharp, her face expressionless. After Sophie drifted to sleep, Evelyn covered her with a quilt, tucking in the edges with care. She turned and found Lydia standing in the doorway, arms crossed. You're overstepping, Miss Hart, Lydia said quietly. You're paid to watch her, not to rewrite the rules. Evelyn straightened her back. She's a child, not a project. You may think your methods are noble, Lydia replied, stepping closer. But I've seen people like you soft hearts trying to play savior. Evelyn's voice stayed calm. Maybe it's not saving her. Maybe it's remembering she's still someone worth saving. For a moment, silence hung between them, broken only by the ticking of the clock. Lydia's tone dropped. You're forgetting who runs this house. Evelyn met Herr Evely. No, ma'am. You only think you do. The words landed like a soft thunderclap. Lydia didn't reply. She simply turned and walked away, her heels striking the floor with a rhythm too steady to be calm. Evelyn stood for a long moment, listening to the echo fade down the hall until the house fell back into its uneasy silence. The next morning came gray and heavy. Clouds hung low over Grace Hill, and the road beyond the gate shimmered with last night's rain. Lydia's voice carried faintly from the foyer, giving brisk instructions to the driver who was loading her suitcase into the car. Evelyn lingered by the staircase, pretending to dust the railing. Sophie peeked from behind her, whispering, Is she going somewhere? It looks like it, Evelyn answered softly. Nathan appeared at the landing, still adjusting his tie. You're leaving for Austin? He asked. Lydia's tone was light, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Just a few days. Charity meetings, the usual. She kissed him on the cheek. Try not to let things get too messy while I'm gone. Her gaze flicked briefly toward Evelyn before she stepped into the car. The door closed with a soft thud, and the black sedan rolled down the drive until it vanished behind the oak trees. For the first time in weeks, the air inside the house felt easy to breathe. Sophie twirled in the hallway, laughing, her footsteps echoing off the walls. It's quiet, she said. Like the house is taking a nap. Evelyn smiled. Then let's not wake it just yet. They spent the morning dusting the library and polishing old picture frames. Nathan worked from his study, the door half open. Every now and then, Evelyn caught him watching them through the glass, a faint softness in his eyes that he quickly hid behind a cough or a turn of a page. After lunch, Sophie begged to bake again. Flour dusted the counter like snow, and the smell of vanilla drifted through the hallways. Evelyn hummed along with the radio an old song about lost roads and coming home. By dusk, Sophie sat in the armchair by the fire, nibbling a cookie, eyelids drooping. Evelyn read aloud until the child drifted to sleep, the flames reflecting gentle gold across her face. When she rose to carry Sophie upstairs, Nathan stood quietly in the doorway. She trusts you, he said. Evelyn paused. Children know when someone listens. He nodded slowly. It's been a long time since this house heard laughter. Then maybe it just needed someone to remind it how, she said, smiling. Nathan looked as if he might answer, but he simply nodded again and stepped aside, letting her pass. Later that night, as Evelyn turned off the last lamp and the halls slipped into darkness, she felt the house settle around her, less like a mansion and more like something breathing, resting. Outside, the crickets sang, and the moonlight poured through the windows in quiet silver. Evelyn closed her notebook on the bedside table and whispered a small prayer for peace. Peace for the child upstairs, for the man trying to remember how to love, and perhaps for herself too. In the morning, Lydia would still be gone, and the world would seem softer. But somewhere, far down the road, the black sedan rolled toward Austin through the mist, carrying with it the faintest trace of perfume and a whisper that the calm inside Grace Hill would not last. And beneath that fading scent, carried on the cool wind through the half-open window, Lydia's voice seemed to echo once more, almost lost in the rustle of the trees. She won't last the season. Autumn came quietly to Grace Hill. The morning smelled of wood smoke and wet leaves, and the maples lining the Caldwell driveway burned a deeper red each day. When the wind blew, it carried the soft rustle of change, something the house itself seemed to feel. For a while, peace held. With Lydia away, laughter returned to the halls. Sophie's drawings filled the refrigerator door, and Nathan began eating dinner at the table again, instead of in his office. Sometimes he'd even stay after the meal, sipping coffee while Evelyn and Sophie played cards under the warm kitchen light. It was during one of those evenings that Sophie asked, "Miss Evelyn, why do people stop smiling when they get older?" Evelyn glanced at Nathan before answering. "Maybe because they forget what made them smile in the first place." Nathan set his cup down. "And what if they remember?" "Then," she said softly, "the light comes back." Emfrey, he looked at her a moment longer than necessary, something unspoken passing between them, fragile as candlelight. But peace never lasts forever. One chilly evening, while closing the curtains in the study, Evelyn noticed a letter lying half open on Nathan's desk. The name on the envelope froze her breath. Lydia Caldwell Sanford, written in bold, elegant strokes. A printed seal from a law firm sat at the corner. The words custody inquiry showed through the paper like a bruise beneath skin. She stepped back quickly, heart drumming. Before she could move away, Nathan entered, rain still glistening on his coat. He saw the letter, then her face. "It's not what it looks like," he said quietly. Evelyn straightened, voice steady but low. "She's trying to take Sophie?" He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Her family's money gives her influence. They claim I'm unstable, that bringing you here proves I can't manage my own household." Evelyn's chest tightened. "Because of me." "And no," Nathan said firmly. "Because she needs control. She always did." Thunder rolled outside, long and slow. For the first time, Evelyn saw the tremor behind his calm fear, not of losing a battle, but of losing his daughter. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "Whatever it takes," he replied. Then softer. "But I don't want you caught in the middle. I already am." Their eyes met, and in that silence lay every word they hadn't dared speak. Later that night, after Sophie had gone to bed, Evelyn stood by the window watching the rain. The light in the hallway flickered and went out, leaving her reflection faint against the glass. Somewhere down the corridor, a door creaked open Sophie's. "Miss Evelyn?" came the sleepy whisper. The light disappeared. Evelyn took a candle from the shelf and knelt beside her. "It's all right, sweetheart. Sometimes lights go out so we remember how to find them again." She struck a match. The tiny flame bloomed between them, warm and trembling. Sophie smiled. "See? It came back." "Yes," Evelyn murmured. "It always does." Yet deep inside, she knew the words weren't entirely true. Because sometimes, just when the light returns, someone comes back to take it away. And far off, beyond the hills, a car's headlights cut through the night, heading straight toward Grace Hill. The black sedan rolled up the gravel driveway just past midnight. Its headlights swept across the old oak trees before coming to rest on the front steps of Grace Hill. Lydia stepped out first, heels clicking, coat wrapped tight against the cold. Her driver handed her a small suitcase and disappeared into the night. Inside, the house was dark, except for the soft amber glow of the kitchen lamp. Evelyn sat at the table with a cup of chamomile tea, unaware that the storm she'd feared had already arrived. The front door opened with a sigh of hinges. Lydia's voice, smooth and sharp, filled the silence. "Still awake, Miss Hart?" Evelyn turned, startled. "Mrs. Caldwell, I thought you wouldn't be back until Monday." Lydia set her gloves on the counter one finger at a time, deliberate and cold. Plans change. She poured herself a glass of wine from the cabinet without asking. I hear there's been quite the domestic arrangement while I was away. Cookies, bedtime stories, little photo projects. I was just keeping things calm for Sophie, Evelyn said evenly. Oh, I'm sure you were, Lydia replied with a faint smile. And Nathan seems very appreciative of your efforts. Evelyn's cheeks warmed, but her tone stayed measured. Your daughter feels safe again. That's all that matters. Lydia leaned closer, eyes gleaming. Don't fool yourself, dear. You may think this is your home now, but it isn't. You're a visitor in a story that's already been written. Ugh. A floorboard creaked above them. Both women turned toward the stairs. Sophie stood there, hair tousled, clutching her small camera. Mom? The girl whispered. Lydia's face softened instantly, mask snapping into place. Darling, what are you doing awake? I heard voices, Sophie said. Are you fighting again? Lydia knelt, brushing a curl from the child's cheek. No, sweetheart, just talking. Sophie looked from one woman to the other. Her voice was small but steady. You said people who tell the truth don't have to whisper. For a moment, no one spoke. The wind outside rattled the windows, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. Evelyn crouched down to Sophie's level. Why don't you head back to bed, honey? I'll tuck you in. Sophie hesitated, then nodded. As they climbed the stairs, Evelyn felt Lydia's gaze on her back cold, calculating, patient. When Evelyn returned to the hallway, Lydia was waiting at the base of the stairs. Try not to get too attached, she said softly. People who do rarely last long here. Then she turned and disappeared into the dark, her perfume lingering in the air like smoke after a candle's been blown out. Upstairs, Evelyn paused outside Sophie's room. The little girl slept again, her camera on the nightstand beside her, a silent witness to everything the adults couldn't say. Evelyn looked toward the window. The rain had stopped, but the clouds had not cleared. A single lamp flickered in the distance, the porch light barely holding on. The house felt different now, not just lonely, but watchful. And as Evelyn stood there, the uneasy thought crept in. Perhaps Lydia hadn't come back to reclaim what was hers. Perhaps she'd come back to destroy what peace remained. Morning sunlight broke through the clouds the next day, spilling across Grace Hill like forgiveness that hadn't yet decided where to land. The storm had passed, but its scent damp earth, crushed leaves, and faint electricity still lingered in the air. Evelyn moved quietly through the kitchen, setting out breakfast. The house felt uneasy, too still, like it knew something was waiting just beyond its walls. Nathan came down later than usual, tie loose, eyes shadowed. She's back, he said, voice heavy. Evelyn nodded. I saw her last night. He looked at her for a long moment before speaking again. She's filed a complaint with the court, claims you've been undermining her authority and influencing Sophie against her. Evelyn's breath caught. That's not true. I know, Nathan said quickly. But her lawyers already made noise about it, and with her family's connections, she's trying to push me out, Evelyn finished softly. Nathan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. I'll handle it. Just be careful. Across the table, the bowl of blueberries sat untouched. The ticking of the old clock filled the silence between them, steady and unforgiving. Later that morning, while Sophie worked on her art project in the sunroom, Lydia appeared in the doorway, smile as sweet as honey, left too long in the jar. What are you drawing, darling? She asked. Sophie looked up hesitantly. Miss Evelyn said we could make a picture of what home feels like. How thoughtful, Lydia murmured, walking closer. And what does home feel like to you? The girl held up the page. A crayon drawing showed 3 figures, Sophie in the middle, Evelyn on one side, Nathan on the other. No Lydia. For a split second, Lydia's expression hardened, but she quickly recovered. That's lovely, sweetheart, she said softly. But maybe you forgot someone? Sophie's hand froze around the crayon. I didn't forget, she whispered. Lydia's tone cooled. You know, sometimes when people come into our lives, they confuse what's real and what's temporary. Evelyn entered then, carrying a tray of lemonade. Everything all right here? Just fine, Lydia said, her smile sharp. Sophie and I were talking about family. Evelyn placed the tray down, calm but watchful. Family is important. Yes, Lydia replied. Which is why I protect mine. After she left, Sophie looked at Evelyn, eyes wet. Why does she hate me? Evelyn knelt, brushing the child's hair back gently. She doesn't hate you, sweetheart. She's just afraid. People who are afraid forget how to love right. Sophie whispered, "Will you leave like the others did?" Evelyn paused, feeling the sting of the question deep in her chest. "Not if I can help it." The afternoon passed slowly. By dusk, a chill had crept back into the house. Nathan was still at work when Lydia knocked softly on Evelyn's door. "I thought we might clear the air," she said. Evelyn nodded, cautious. "I'd like that." Lydia stepped inside, eyes sweeping over the small, tidy guest room. "You've made yourself comfortable." "I'm here for Sophie," Evelyn replied. "Yes, you keep saying that," Lydia murmured. "But from where I stand, it looks like you're here for something more. I don't understand." "Oh, I think you do," Lydia said quietly. "The late-night talks, the looks across the table. You think I haven't noticed?" Evelyn shook her head. "You're mistaken." "Am I?" Lydia's voice dropped to a whisper. "Because when the court asks about your influence, I'll have plenty to say." She turned toward the door, pausing only long enough to deliver the line like a knife wrapped in silk. "Enjoy your time here, Miss Hart. The clock's already ticking." That night, the house slept under a thin moon. Crickets hummed in the fields, and a soft wind pressed against the tall windows. But inside Grace Hill, the air felt heavy again, like it had when Evelyn first arrived, thick with something unseen, something waiting. Evelyn lay awake, listening. She had learned the rhythm of the house by now, the sigh of the old pipes, the creak of the stairs, the muffled tick of the hallway clock. But tonight, another sound joined them, a faint shuffle down the hall. She slipped on her robe and stepped out quietly. At the far end of the corridor, Lydia stood by Nathan's office door, a flashlight in hand, her silk robe shimmering faintly. Evelyn froze, half hidden in shadow. The beam of light swept across the room, lingering on the desk drawer, then the sound of a latch clicking. Lydia slid something inside, a small velvet pouch. Evelyn's breath caught. Then Lydia turned, noticing movement at the corner of her eye. The two women locked gazes for one long, silent second, the air between them sharp as glass. "Couldn't sleep?" Lydia asked coolly, as if nothing were amiss. Evelyn steadied her voice. "No, I heard a noise." "Ah, must have been me. I was just checking on the windows. This old house leaks secrets." Without waiting for a reply, Lydia brushed past her, perfume trailing like smoke, and disappeared into the darkness. Evelyn stood there for a long moment, heart pounding, staring at the closed office door. She wanted to open it to look, to know, but something stopped her. She turned back toward her room and whispered into the quiet, "Not tonight." The next morning, Nathan's voice echoed through the hall, sharp, angry, disbelieving. "Evelyn, could you come here, please?" She entered the study, hands trembling. He held the velvet pouch she'd seen Lydia place in the drawer. Inside lay a gold bracelet. Engraved on the inside were the words, "To Lydia, with love." "I found this hidden in my drawer," he said slowly. "Lydia says she saw you near the office last night. She thinks you were trying to—" He stopped, the words too cruel to finish. Evelyn's face went pale. "Nathan, I didn't. I saw her here. Not me. She put that there." He hesitated, torn between logic and fear. "You're saying Lydia planted it?" "Yes." Her voice cracked. "I swear it." For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking clock. Nathan rubbed his temples, exhausted. "You should rest, Evelyn. This whole situation's spinning out of control. I need time to think." She wanted to shout, to shake him, to make him see what was plain as daylight, but something in his face stopped her. The same tired pain she'd seen in so many others who'd lost too much already. She nodded instead. "Of course, M." When she turned to leave, Sophie stood at the doorway, eyes wide, clutching her camera. "Miss Evelyn?" the girl whispered. Evelyn crouched to her level. "Go play, sweetheart. Everything's fine." But Sophie didn't move. She glanced toward the office, then back at Evelyn. "I saw something," she said softly. "Last night, I was taking pictures of the lightning through the window." Evelyn's heart jumped. "What did you see?" Sophie hesitated. I think I got a picture of Mom. Evelyn's breath caught. With the bracelet? The girl nodded. She didn't see me. Evelyn exhaled, voice trembling. Sweetheart, don't tell anyone yet. Keep that photo safe, all right? Sophie whispered, okay, and ran upstairs, clutching the camera. Evelyn stayed there in the hallway, her knees weak, the morning light catching on the framed photos that lined the wall snapshots of a family frozen in better times. Downstairs, Lydia's voice floated faintly from the kitchen, humming an old tune. A song Evelyn recognized. A song about lies that sound like love. The shadow of blame had been cast, and now, even truth would have to fight to be heard. The morning after the confrontation felt heavy, like the world itself was holding its breath. The trees outside dripped with the last of the night's rain, and a pale fog rolled over Grace Hill's lawn. The house seemed to listen to every word, every footstep, as though it knew truth was hiding somewhere inside its walls. Evelyn woke early. She brewed coffee and stood by the window, watching the mist swallow the road. Her thoughts ran in circles. Lydia's lies, Nathan's doubt, Sophie's trembling voice. Then she remembered the photograph. Sophie came down soon after, still in her pajamas, camera slung around her neck. Her hair was a mess, her eyes sleepy but bright. Morning, sweetheart, Evelyn said softly. Do you still have that picture you took during the storm? Sophie nodded. I didn't show Dad yet. I was scared he'd take my camera. Evelyn crouched beside her. Can you show it to me first? The little girl opened the camera, scrolling through the tiny screen with careful fingers. Then there it was. A flash of lightning caught in the frame, the window pane glowing white, and in the reflection, Lydia's face, half-lit hand, slipping something into the desk drawer. Evelyn's heart pounded. Sophie, she whispered, you might have just saved both of us. Sophie frowned. Did Mom do something bad? Evelyn hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Sometimes grown-ups forget how to tell the truth when they're afraid of losing something. But what you did, it's honest. And the truth matters. They printed the photo on Evelyn's small travel printer, the only piece of technology she owned besides her phone. The image came out grainy but clear enough. Lydia's silhouette was unmistakable. That afternoon, Nathan returned early from town. His face, unreadable. Evelyn met him at the doorway, holding the photo like a fragile secret. I need you to see something, she said quietly. He studied the image for a long moment. The color drained from his face. Where did you get this? Sophie took it. By accident. He sank into the nearest chair, hands clasped. God. A pause. I wanted to believe Lydia wouldn't sink this low. She already has, Evelyn said gently. And she'll do worse if we let her. Nathan rubbed his forehead. If this gets out, there'll be lawyers, headlines, chaos. Sophie doesn't need that. Then protect her another way, Evelyn said. The truth's already here, Nathan. You just have to choose whether to hide it or heal from it. Outside, the fog began to lift, the sunlight struggling through like a promise. For the first time, Nathan looked up at her, really looked. You believe people can come back from anything, don't you? Evelyn smiled faintly. I have to. It's the only reason I'm still standing. But even as she said it, footsteps sounded upstairs, measured, slow, deliberate. Lydia's. She was home early again, and her shadow stretched down the staircase like a warning. Evelyn slipped the photo into her pocket, whispering, Not yet. Not until she shows the world who she really is. The sound of Lydia's heels echoed down the staircase, each step measured, almost musical. Evelyn turned toward the noise, schooling her face into calm. Sophie sat at the kitchen table, coloring, unaware that the storm was about to begin again. Good afternoon, Lydia said, voice smooth as silk but cold underneath. I didn't expect such a quiet house. Evelyn offered a polite nod. Sophie's doing her schoolwork. Mr. Caldwell went into town. I see. Lydia's gaze moved across the counter, the printer, the stack of freshly printed paper. Her eyes narrowed for just a fraction of a second before she smiled. You've been busy. Evelyn's heartbeat quickened. She casually slid the photograph deeper into her apron pocket, just printing some worksheets for Sophie. Lydia's voice softened, though her eyes did not. You're such a dedicated caretaker, Miss Hart. Tell me, do you always get this involved in other people's families? Evelyn forced a small smile. Only when those families forget how to love each other. For a heartbeat, Lydia's composure cracked. Then she laughed lightly, the sound brittle. Careful, dear. In this town, love can be mistaken for ambition. She moved closer, her perfume strong enough to sting. Nathan may trust you, but trust fades. You'll find that out soon enough. Before Evelyn could answer, Sophie's voice broke the tension. Mom, look! The girl held up her drawing this time. 4 figures beneath a glowing yellow Sunday. Lydia blinked in surprise. You added me? She asked. Sophie nodded. Miss Evelyn said families get better when people try again. The room fell silent. For a flicker of a moment, Lydia's expression softened. Then she noticed the corner of paper sticking out from Evelyn's pocket. Her eyes sharpened. What's that? She asked. Evelyn froze. Just a note. Show me, Lydia said, stepping forward. It's nothing important. Lydia's hand shot out, snatching the paper. The photograph fluttered open between them. Lightning. The reflection of her own face. The unmistakable image of her hand placing the bracelet in Nathan's drawer. The silence was deafening. Sophie gasped. Mom. Lydia's lips parted, searching for words. That's not... Evelyn's voice was steady. You don't have to lie anymore. Lydia's hands trembled as she gripped the photo. You don't understand what it's like to be replaced, to lose everything you built. Evelyn met her gaze with quiet compassion. Then stop destroying what's left. For the first time since she'd arrived at Grace Hill, Lydia looked small, fragile even. She set the photo on the table and whispered, You'll ruin him. You'll ruin all of us. Evelyn shook her head. No, the truth won't ruin anyone. It only hurts when you hide it. Lydia turned and walked toward the door, shoulders stiff. You think you've won? She said softly, almost to herself. But love doesn't save everyone. She left the room, the door closing with a soft click. Evelyn exhaled, every muscle trembling. Sophie ran to her, burying her face in Evelyn's apron. Is she mad? No. Sweetheart, Evelyn whispered, stroking her hair. She's just scared. Scared of the light finally coming in. Through the window, the fog outside had lifted completely. Sunlight poured across the kitchen floor, bright and steady, touching the edges of the photograph where it lay. The image shimmered faintly before the paper curled, like it, too, had done its job. Evelyn picked it up and smiled. Sometimes, she murmured, truth has its own way of speaking. And upstairs, a door closed gently. No shouting, no anger, just the sound of a house learning, slowly, how to breathe again. The next morning arrived with sunlight that felt almost unreal. After days of gray and rain, Grace Hill glowed beneath a sky so blue it hurt to look at. But inside the house, the air was heavy again, not with anger this time, but with the kind of silence that follows a confession too large to take back. Nathan found the photograph first. It sat on the kitchen table, where Evelyn had left it after Lydia fled upstairs. He didn't call for anyone. He simply stood there, staring at the image until the coffee in his cup went cold. When he finally looked up, Evelyn was standing by the sink, drying her hands on a towel. Her eyes were tired, but calm. So, he said quietly. It's true. Yes, she replied. She planted the bracelet. Sophie caught it by accident. He nodded slowly, setting the photo down. I wanted to believe she wouldn't go that far. People cross lines when they're afraid of being forgotten. Nathan sighed. And now, my daughter's seen it too. Evelyn folded the towel neatly. She saw the truth. That's not always a bad thing. They stood in silence for a moment, the ticking clock filling the space between them. Then Nathan said, I'll talk to Lydia. Alone. Evelyn hesitated. Are you sure that's wise? She's Sophie's mother, he said softly. And I owe her that much. And upstairs, the sound of voices drifted faintly through the hall, Lydia's sharp, Nathan's steady. Evelyn stayed in the kitchen with Sophie, who sat cross-legged on the floor, building a tower from wooden blocks. Miss Evelyn? The girl asked quietly. If people love each other, why do they make each other cry? Evelyn knelt beside her, helping her steady the blocks. Because sometimes love gets tangled up in pride. But if it's real, it finds a way to untangle itself. Even for Mom, even for her. The tower wobbled, then collapsed softly onto the floor. Sophie sighed. Evelyn smiled and said, We just Build again, right? The child nodded, starting over. Upstairs, the argument swelled muffled words, then silence. A door slammed. Moments later, Nathan descended the staircase. He looked older somehow, his shoulders heavy, eyes red-rimmed. "She's gone," he said simply. Took her suitcase. Said she needs to think. Evelyn felt something shift. Not victory, not relief. Just the weight of what had finally broken. "She'll be back," Nathan added, voice hollow. "People like Lydia always come back." Evelyn nodded. "Then you'd better decide what you'll say when she does." He met her eyes, and in that long, quiet look, something passed between them, not romance, but understanding. Two people carrying the same burden of regret and hope. As he turned away, Sophie peeked around the corner, small and uncertain. Nathan knelt, opening his arms. "Hey, pumpkin," he said gently. "Come here." She ran to him, wrapping her arms around his neck. For a moment, the house seemed to breathe again. Outside, the wind shifted. The maples rustled softly, dropping their first golden leaves onto the gravel drive. But the peace didn't last long. That night, as Evelyn was closing the windows, she saw headlights at the far end of the road, faint but moving closer. Her heart skipped. The car turned onto the drive, gravel crunching under its tires. Lydia was coming back, and this time, she wouldn't be alone. The sound of tires crunching on gravel drew everyone's attention. Nathan stepped out onto the porch, the autumn air cool against his skin. The headlights cut through the trees, stopping just short of the front steps. The car door opened, and Lydia emerged. Dressed impeccably, as always, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. But she wasn't alone. A man stepped out after her, carrying a briefcase. His suit looked too polished for the countryside. Nathan's voice was calm. "You brought company." "This is Mr. Halperin," Lydia said, tone clipped. "My attorney." Evelyn stood in the doorway, arms crossed, but silent. Sophie clung to her leg, small fingers twisting in the fabric of her skirt. Lydia looked at her daughter, her voice softening. "Sweetheart, can you go upstairs for a moment? Mommy needs to talk to the adults." Sophie didn't move. "Are you mad again?" Lydia's smile wavered. "No, darling, just sorting things out." Evelyn bent down, whispering to Sophie. "It's okay, honey. I'll be right here." The girl hesitated, then nodded, and walked upstairs slowly, her little footsteps echoing like raindrops on the stairs. When she was gone, Lydia turned back to Nathan. "I came to make this simple," she said. "You dismiss Miss Hart, and we settle quietly. No lawyers, no courts. Or," she glanced toward her attorney, "we do this the hard way." Nathan's voice was low. "You tried to frame her, Lydia." The lawyer shifted awkwardly. "My client, she lied," Nathan cut in. "And my daughter caught her." Lydia's jaw tightened. "A child's photograph isn't proof of anything. It could have been edited." "It wasn't," Evelyn said quietly. She stepped forward and laid the photo on the porch rail. "You know that." For a long time, Lydia said nothing. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faint smell of wood smoke from a distant farmhouse. Then, without warning, her voice cracked, the mask finally slipping. "You think I wanted any of this?" she whispered. "To live in this house, with ghosts I can't forgive and a husband who looks at me like a stranger?" Nathan's voice softened. "Then why keep punishing everyone else for it?" "Because it's the only way I still feel like I matter," she said. Her eyes glistened. "You were supposed to love me through the silence." Evelyn turned away, not out of disdain but out of mercy. Some wounds weren't meant for witnesses. Lydia straightened, blinking back tears, her pride snapping back into place. "You'll regret this," she murmured, grabbing her coat. "Maybe," Nathan said quietly, "but not for the truth." And the lawyer followed her back to the car, clearly uncomfortable. The engine started, headlights sweeping across the porch one last time before the vehicle disappeared into the trees. The silence that followed was deep and long. Nathan stood motionless, his hands trembling slightly. Evelyn finally spoke. "You should go check on Sophie." He nodded. "She shouldn't have to see any of this." As he climbed the stairs, Evelyn stepped out onto the porch. The night was cool, stars faint behind drifting clouds. She wrapped her arms around herself, breathing in the quiet. From the open window above, she heard Sophie's sleepy voice. "Dad, is Miss Evelyn staying?" Nathan paused before answering. "I hope so." Evelyn closed her eyes, letting the wind brush against her face, gentle and forgiving. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, healing had begun, not the easy kind that forgets, but the honest kind that remembers and forgives anyway. Yet somewhere beyond the trees, the faint sound of an engine lingered, distant but persistent. The shadow of silence wasn't gone yet. Autumn deepened its hold on Grace Hill. The mornings came colder now, with mist curling low over the fields and the scent of applewood drifting from chimneys across town. The Caldwell house stood tall and quiet at the end of the winding road, no longer a fortress, but not yet a home. Inside, the rhythm of life had softened. Nathan spent his mornings working in the study again, but the door was no longer closed. Sophie took her lessons by the window, where the light hit her sketchbook just right. And Evelyn, she had become the heartbeat of the house, without meaning to. She moved through the kitchen humming softly, baking cornbread the way her grandmother once did, slow, careful, full of memory. The walls, once cold and echoing, now carried the warmth of small sounds, the clink of dishes, the creak of the floorboards, the faint laughter of a child upstairs. It was the laughter that saved them, she often thought. The small, stubborn sound of life refusing to fade. Nathan came in just as she was setting the pan on the counter. "Smells like home," he said, smiling for the first time in what felt like years. Evelyn turned, half teasing. "That's a big word, coming from you." He chuckled softly. "You've changed the air here, you know. The quiet isn't so heavy anymore." She wiped her hands on a towel. Maybe the house just needed to remember what kindness sounds like. They fell into a comfortable silence. Outside, wind swept through the trees, scattering the last of the gold and crimson leaves across the porch. Then Nathan's voice grew thoughtful. "Lydia called this morning. Evelyn still. Anne? She's in Austin, staying with her sister. She apologized." He exhaled slowly. "She said she needs time, real time, to face what she's done." Evelyn nodded, eyes soft. "That's something." She also asked if Sophie could visit next month. "That's good," Evelyn said. "Children need both parents, even when the parents are learning to be human again." "Oh." Nathan looked at her, his expression somewhere between gratitude and regret. "You make forgiveness sound easy." "It's not," she said quietly. "It's just necessary." Before either could speak again, a small voice called from the stairs. "Miss Evelyn, look!" Sophie ran down, holding a drawing, a watercolor this time, full of light and color. The house stood in the center, bright and open. In front of it, 3 figures held hands beneath a sky full of marigolds. Evelyn knelt to see it closer. "Is this Grace Hill?" Sophie nodded proudly. "I wanted to paint it happy again." Nathan smiled. "You did more than that, sweetheart. You reminded us how it feels." Evelyn touched the edge of the painting, her throat tightening. "It's beautiful, Sophie. Just beautiful." The girl grinned, then ran off to hang it by the stairs, where the morning light would hit it every day. For a long time, Evelyn and Nathan stood there, watching her. Then Nathan said softly, "You could stay, you know." Evelyn blinked. "Stay? Grace Hill's big enough for more than ghosts. And Sophie, she'd miss you." Evelyn smiled faintly, unsure if her heart was trembling from warmth or fear. "Let's see what the season brings." He nodded. "Fair enough." Outside, the wind rose, sweeping across the hills, carrying the scent of cinnamon and pine from the woods. The air felt lighter than it had in months, as if the house itself was exhaling, finally free from the weight of all the things unsaid. For the first time, Grace Hill was quiet in the right way. The following week passed in quiet rhythm. Grace Hill seemed to exhale at last. The days grew shorter. Evenings arrived, wrapped in gold and blue. Evelyn found herself spending more time on the porch, watching the sunset spread like spilled honey across the valley. Inside, life had settled into something almost tender. Sophie's laughter floated through the halls again, light and steady. Nathan repaired the old swing in the yard, the same one that had hung unused since Sophie's mother passed. And Evelyn, she tried not to think too hard about the day she'd have to leave. One crisp afternoon, she sat on the porch steps, shelling peas into a bowl, when Nathan joined her. He sat beside her without speaking, letting the quiet fill the spaces words couldn't reach. The air smelled of wood smoke and dry leaves. "You're thinking about leaving," he said at last. Evelyn smiled faintly. "I never meant to stay this long. You brought this place back to life," he said. "I don't think you realize how much that matters." She shook her head gently. "I didn't do anything special. I just listened." He looked out across the yard where Sophie was running through the leaves, her laughter echoing under the trees. Sometimes listening is the bravest thing a person can do. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Evelyn said softly, "You and Sophie will be all right now." "Maybe," Nathan said. "But Grace Hill feels like it still has room for one more soul." She turned to him, smiling through the sadness. "I'll think about it." That night, after Sophie had gone to bed, Evelyn walked the halls one last time. The portraits on the walls no longer felt like strangers watching. They looked almost alive, softened by the glow of the lamps. The house no longer sighed in loneliness. It hummed, low and steady, like it had found its heartbeat again. In Sophie's room, the watercolor painting still hung by the stairs, the bright house, the family beneath the marigold sky. Someone had added one last detail. A little bird perched on the roof, wings half open. Evelyn smiled, tracing the brushstrokes lightly with her fingertip. "You clever girl," she whispered. Downstairs, she left a note on the kitchen table, simple, handwritten, folded neatly beside a marigold from the garden. "Nathan, thank you for letting me be part of Grace Hill's story. This house doesn't need saving anymore, it just needs living. And I believe you and Sophie can do that now. I'll come back one day to see it in full bloom. Evelyn." When dawn came, the mist rolled low over the hills. Nathan found the note, read it twice, then stepped out onto the porch. The air was cool and still. In the distance, the old bus was winding down the road toward the station. A small figure in a brown coat, seated by the window. He raised a hand, though he knew she couldn't see it. Behind him, Sophie's sleepy voice carried softly through the open door. "Dad, is she gone?" Nathan turned, smiling through his tears. "No, sweetheart," he said. "She's just giving us a chance to grow." The morning sun broke through the fog then, lighting the marigolds by the steps. Their petals gleamed bright gold against the gray stones, stubborn, alive, unafraid of the coming winter. And for the first time, Grace Hill was exactly what its name promised. A place of grace and the quiet kind of love that stays long after the footsteps fade. The house on Grace Hill had stood through storms and silence, through tears and laughter. But in the end, it was never the walls or windows that needed mending. It was the hearts that lived within. Over time, each person in that old house found their own kind of healing. Nathan learning how to listen again. Sophie learning that love doesn't vanish when people do. And Evelyn discovering that sometimes the place you were meant to save ends up saving you instead. The wind that once howled through empty halls now carried the hum of life, soft, imperfect, but true. And maybe that's all any of us are really doing, as we grow older, learning to listen, to forgive, and to let a little more light in. The marigolds blooming by the porch didn't erase the past. They simply reminded everyone that even the hardest seasons can give birth to color again. Lydia's departure wasn't an ending, but a quiet mercy, a promise that healing, though late, was still possible. It's a simple lesson, really. Love has no expiration date. No matter the scars we carry or the years we think we've wasted, kindness can still reach us where regret once lived. Like the porch light glowing at dusk, steady and patient, the smallest act of goodness can guide someone home from their longest night. And for those of us who've lived long enough to know loss, we understand home isn't always a place. Sometimes it's a person, sometimes it's forgiveness, and sometimes it's the courage to start again. Maybe tonight, when you sit by your own window with a cup of tea and the sound of the wind outside, you'll think of Grace Hill and remember that no life is too broken to bloom again. So take a deep breath, dear friends. Think about the people who once helped you find your way when you were lost. And if you can, be that light for someone else. If this story touched your heart, press 1 in the comments. And if you think it could have been told better, press 0 and tell me what you'd change. Either way, I'd love to hear from you. Because stories like this don't just end, they keep living in the hearts that choose to listen. And somewhere, in every small American town, Another Grace Hill is still waiting to be healed by a little kindness.